Any semi-fictional retelling of the stories within this content are for entertainment purposes only. Go. So let me start here. I have an 18-year-old daughter. My brother has a 19-year-old daughter. My brother JJ got two daughters. Cousin Jerry has two daughters and two sons. So I say all of that to say, when we sit around and we glory story, which is what I call it glory story, but we don't glorify anything negative. We laugh about the negative things because we made it out of those things. We do talk about the perils of those things, but when we sit around and glory story about our lives and talk about the freedom we had and how we would go to 42nd Street and how we would have two separate groups of friends that would eventually meet up at the same party. Now it's our party. The 90s was really, really different. And this is what I explained to my daughter. My middle school years for the 90s were hella perilous because crack just came out maybe 4 years prior. So the streets were kind of crazy. You kind of had to run in groups of kids. Violence was definitely mandatory. Violence was the language of that era when it came to being a young man, and sometimes being a young woman meant there would be violence as well. We talk about those things, but we also talk about the fact that the rules of engagement were different. If you liked a girl or a guy, you walked up to that girl or guy and said, "Hey, girl or guy, I think you cute. Give me your phone number. Let's exchange." Let me tell you what the biggest setup for girls was. You giving them your number. But if you knew you had motion, you confidently gave that number up because it's like, oh, if she don't call me, it's cool. I'm about to be over here anyway. I'm gonna just keep stacking these numbers up, which is another thing. This is one of the telltale signs that we understood as young men that we were ready to go outside. We had a pen in our pocket, and if you didn't want to look like you was going to play yourself, you did not bring a notebook because it made you look bad. If you had a notebook in your pocket and you was bagging numbers, girls was not messing with you. If you had a pen but you needed a random piece of paper, it looked better for some reason. Girls didn't need to worry about that kind of stuff. I laugh because as much as I talk to my daughter about females being very aggressive in my day, they weren't short on attention. So they didn't need to make sure they had a pen. They just had to make sure they was cuter than the other girl. That was really the lay of the land. If you were cuter than the other person and you were confidently cuter than the other person, you knew the rules of engagement for you. If you understood that you was kind of mid-tier, you was kind of like not the guy, you kind of understood that you had to wait your turn. And by wait your turn, that means you wait for a girl to actually make eye contact with you, maintain it, then go talk to that girl. Because you mid-tier, you're not used to that attention, so you got to wait it out. But when you apex, you understand that it don't matter the eye contact or not, because once that eye contact is made, it's a dunzo. You know what I'm saying? So, but that's what you came up knowing. And when we tell those stories and we talk to our daughters and our sons are like, man, y'all wasn't da 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 da. The daughters are always mortified at the way we would approach girls. I was talking to my daughter and my niece at the same time. My daughter said to me, like, you mean you would just walk up to girls you thought was cute and be like, hey, this, that, and the third, you chop it up and get their number? And I'm like, yeah, more often than not, 6 out of 10 success rate, because not for nothing, girls were harder to convince back then. As much as you could get a number, you really had to have a certain way of speaking in order to know that you were going to get that number. Any hesitancy, I'm telling you, these ladies back in the days, if you was anything hesitant, it wasn't with it. They needed to know that you were going to confidently navigate their number. They needed to trust those 7 digits in your possession, because back then those 7 digits were everything. It was the gateway. There was no IG and also this and also that. There was the phone number. If you was a cool cat, you got the phone number and the address. But that's a whole different level of approach. That's a symposium, and we don't have time for that. Because I told that story to my daughter too, and she's like, "You mean a girl gave you her address the first day meeting you?" Yes, yes, that happened because it was about the approach. That was the understanding of the day. If you try to do that now, you'll look like a creep. Imagine somebody asking you for your phone number and address. Not for nothing. If a girl or a guy thought you was cute enough, you would definitely throw them the address because you was trying to link up immediately because the chemistry was just that deep. So let me not act like an address came with every phone number. You had to get the address way later. Sometimes by the second, third phone call, depending on what the link up was. Also, I would like to say I'm disappointed in today's males because I've come to find out that girls are giving out their real phone number but blocking the call because you fellas are so needlessly persistent by saying, "Oh, if that's your number, let me call you right now." Are you kidding me, fella? You would get no chicks if you was back in the days. Let me just let that be known. In keeping with that, when we tell these stories to our daughters and our sons, they can't believe it. So it's almost like we're romanticizing the 90s for them. Because if we're talking about the 90s to them, all they see are basement bashments, hoop earrings, polo gear, Nas, Biggie, Tupac, and talking to girls and guys in the streets. That's what they see when we tell stories. That's the other rule of engagement that I also like to talk about with young men and women when I go to these high schools. When you got a girl's number on Monday, you didn't dial that phone number until Wednesday. You did not. You just didn't. Like you did not want to look like you've never been here before, but you also want to look like you don't do this all the time. There's a certain way to navigate that. And when you talk to young men about that, it's like you can see their brains fry. It's like, wait, you want to look like you don't do it, but you want to look like you do it, but you want to have confidence, but you don't want to be too confident. Yes. Yes. Yeah, all of those things all at once because it has to be molded. The thing about growing up as a young man during the 90s, you had to shape yourself for the environments that you wanted to be in and the environments that you were in at the same time. I lived in Brownsville, but I didn't hang out in Brownsville. I hung out in Soho. I hung out down the hill in the projects with my cousins because that's where the fun was at. Or I was in Crown Heights because that's where all the parties was at. Plus, it was close to Flatbush, and I'm from Flatbush, which is a whole nother story. There were just certain things in the 90s that took place where you understood that it was safe to do those things. Over time, it became unsafe. So when you start talking about this 90s romanticizing of how things were, they need to understand that we were steeped in it and prepared for it. And we need to stop telling our kids that they wouldn't have been ready for the 90s because it messes with their present confidence. Because if they see us come out of it and we tell them that you never would have made it, what are they going to do while they're in present day? Probably not believe in themselves. We have to stop romanticizing and hyping ourselves up. There's a lot of stuff we went through that we would much rather not have. You think getting jumped in the streets is cool? You think fighting in the train station is cool? You think being in a crowd of people and all of a sudden you hear crack because that's that orange box cutter. Everybody scatters to see who has it. Nobody wants to live in that peril. You ever been robbed with a hammer? Nah, you probably haven't been robbed with a hammer. But it's one of those things where it's like there's other things that came with understanding the jungle. They would have been prepared for it, but they wouldn't have tried to be main characters every day like we did. They would have found their friend group, hung out where it was safe, navigated where their interests were, and did it just like we did it, only we had to be main character because in those days, if you wanted to get anything, you had to go first. You couldn't wait. They would have understood that waiting probably would have got them something that was better suited for them, not actually get an environment and have to fight our fit. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of times we threw ourselves into situations that we had to fight our fit in, not fighting to fit in because we were going to be there regardless. But there was a lot of ruffled feathers when we were trying to make our way, making our way down. There's no need for that ever. The 90s was crazy. The 90s was lovely. When we tell these stories to our kids, we need to tell it all. Because if we don't, they're going to run around thinking the world was menace to society, living single and friends. Because my daughter was raised in the suburbs. Go. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, notification bell. You know all the things that all the popular people tell y'all to do and then y'all do it. I want y'all to do it for me until I get popular. Then you can do what you want. Go.